BFBS.
I joined the Army in 1995. I was commissioned as a REME officer in 96, served in Bosnia, Kosovo, Northern Ireland, Afghanistan twice, and I was served all around, specialised in what's called influence operations for the latter half of my career.
What does that mean?
It's all the units which were around 77 Brigade, but I was in the precursor of those units. So civil affairs, information operations, media operations, those sort of things.
Now, you were medically discharged. Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, I've basically been hiding the fact that I'd been suffering from depression since the year 2000. And by 2016, it had got to a point where it had recurred so many times that the Army said, look, it's really time for us to part company. So I was discharged with a diagnosis of recurrent depression and post-traumatic stress disorder.
Can't believe you suffered for 16 years.
Yeah, I started trying to speak more openly about it in the last few years of my career. I wrote a few articles in British Army Review magazine and such like, and was in Soldier magazine for it. But it's one of those things that eventually it's something that will eat you up inside if you don't talk about it. And so the best thing was to talk about it, really.
How difficult was it to leave the Army?
Very. I mean, it's always difficult leaving the Army anyhow because it's such a major part of your life. I think when you're medically discharged, it's like going through a bereavement because you feel you've let your friends down, and you feel you're letting yourself down in a way, even though you're not. But I found it immensely difficult.
By talking about what happened, have you managed to identify what it was that triggered the depression?
I think there's many things. It's down to my personality. It's down to things that have happened in my life and whatever. But it helps me understand it. I mean, I'm a strong believer in the theory that peace can't be achieved by force. It can only be achieved by understanding. And so therefore, if you understand yourself and you understand how mental health affects you, then it will help you achieve that peace with yourself, which sounds a bit strange, but actually it does work.
Where did you go for help?
Initially through the medical services and through the Defence Community Mental Health units, which are around the military, and they were brilliant. And then now I'm a veteran. I'm using places like Hidden Wounds in Help for Heroes, and that's helped me out.
Yeah, it's a nice top you've got on. Describe your top you've got on there.
Yeah, some blatant branding. It's helpful. It's the top that I'm going to wear on the North Pole. So, well, obviously with some layers underneath it, but it's just advertising that I'm running for Help for Heroes.
He's got more branding than Lewis Hamilton on that top,
including your runningrob.com website. Now, this is quite amazing because it does basically inform people what you are doing. Oh my goodness! Tell us, what are you doing?
Well, as you said before, it completes a trio of events. I've done the Marathon des Sables, which was 155 miles across the desert, 6 days. The Everest Marathon, which starts above 5,000 metres, 50% less oxygen. And this one's the North Pole Marathon. And I was trying to find a cold marathon. It's quite hard to define which one's the coldest.
Yeah.
But I spoke to somebody who organises one on the North Pole and one on the South Pole as well. And I said, which one's colder? And without hesitation, he said North Pole. So I said, right, that's the one I'm going to do.
Have you always been a runner? I mean, before the depression, were you a runner then, or is it something that you've started after that?
I've always ran. I'm not a fast runner by any stretch of the imagination, but since the depression, I've found that physical activity really helps me.
Yeah.
So, for example, over almost the last 500 days, I've run every single day for 500 days, whether that be 1 mile or 32 miles in a day. So it does help me because it keeps those balances right in your brain. It makes you feel better about yourself.
Those endorphins, you need those endorphins.
Absolutely, yeah. Even if, like this morning, I was running at 5 o'clock.
Really?
Yeah.
Just before you came to do an interview.
Yeah.
So, do you feel like in order to make money for charity these days, you need to do something this extreme? I mean, there's a piece in the paper today about a guy who just keeps on running across America. They're calling him the real Forrest Gump. He's done 15,000 miles. It seems that just doing a marathon isn't enough anymore. Is this why you've chosen some of these extreme ones?
Well, I think some people that run marathons earn a tremendous amount for charity because of the personal story behind it.
Yeah.
I haven't yet reached those echelons of raising that amount of money, but I think it's because once you've done one marathon, what's the next step? And people think ultra marathon, so I'll go and run further than a marathon, and so on. And now I've just taken it to the next extreme and realised that, well, actually, I really like travel, as you were talking to Ben Fogel earlier.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, let's go and get some of those experiences in some of the most extreme places. And for me, the more extreme something is, the more enduring something is, the better it feels for me.
Really?
Yeah.
So when do you go out to the North Pole then?
Fly out on the 5th of April. I fly to an island, the extreme northern island in the world called Svalbard, probably pronounced that wrong, which is part of Norway. And then from there, I'll fly to the ice runway, which is near the North Pole, which the Russians have set up now because the summer equinox has happened, so it's now daylight.
Yeah.
Fly into there, and then the run is basically around there. Now, the North Pole moves, so eventually we will get to the North Pole at some point.
Right. Is it expensive itself? There's a lot of flights in there. How expensive is it for you to actually even just to take part in it?
It's a very expensive marathon. I mean, of all the marathons I've done, this one blows it out of the water. It's considerable, the undertaking financially to take this on. I've had help from supporters and that to be able to raise that entry fee alone. You're talking something in the region of £15,000.
Wow, that's incredible, isn't it?
Now you're going to be running across ice.
Mm-hmm.
How safe is that?
Well, it's ice with snow on, so I'll tell you when I come back how safe it is and how many bruises I've got. Yeah, the ice, it's going to be okay. Most people do it in normal trainers, and it's tricky for me to find trainers which have enough grip, enough metal studs or whatever, or studs that I can put on them, because I have problems with my feet, unsurprisingly, and so therefore I need quite a bit of cushioning.
How do you prep for a race? What's the temperature going to be?
That's minus 35.
How do you train for something like that?
Well, the recent cold spell has been a godsend, and I've been running around Hampshire with a full face mask and goggles and such, getting some odd looks. But next week I'm going into a climatic chamber where they'll take me down to minus 25, and I'll have a real opportunity to try different amounts of kit out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because when
it's all the rubbing and chafing and what feels good, and I suppose.
Well, your body can produce about a kilowatt of heat, which is a 2-bar fire, and so therefore you don't want that sweat to evaporate because that will then freeze. So it's a matter of running as uncomfortably as you can with sweaty clothes on, which isn't evaporating. So I've got to try and get that balance right.
It sounds like you like doing anything extreme. Is there anything at the back of your mind that you're going to do after this?
Oh, that's a great question. There's a few things. Anything I do next is going to be big. I want it to be big as long as somebody's got the corporate backing to help me. So I'm talking, like Ben Fogle climbing Everest. I'd love to do that.
Really?
Maybe rowing across the Atlantic, but I think that's quite silly. But the next thing for me really is the Invictus Games. The trials for that take place in the next few weeks. I qualified because I was wounded, injured and sick, and really I'd love to have that opportunity because that'll probably open my eyes to where else this love of running and sport can take me. I love my job I have at the moment, but I think I really need to do something in the area which I love, which is running veterans.
What is your day job?
I work as a civil servant.
Oh, okay. Can you tell us more about that?
I work for the Department of Transport and I deal with the rail side of things.
Okay. You don't want to say any more?
No, it's a great job.
Oh,
really
good.
enjoy it. I mean, it's the first interview I had and the first job I got.
Good for you.
And it's brilliant.
So how can we support you then?
If anyone can go to my website, runningrob.com, click on donate. All the money goes to Help for Heroes. Help for Heroes have been tremendous. The stuff that they do to bring the camaraderie of veterans who have been wounded, injured and sick and had that career cut short through sometimes no fault of their own or whatever, is tremendous. And you can't underestimate how good they are. So go to my website, runningrob.com, click on donate.
Well, look, when you become a famous Invictus star, don't forget us.
Don't forget us.
Okay,
yes. Yeah.
You must come back and tell us how you get on. Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic stuff. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, Rob.
It's been a pleasure.
BFBS.